Please make sure that your sound is on before you begin these video notes. If your sound is off, then you are going to miss a majority of the content here today. Now that we're done with Algebra 2 and we're done with trig, we have one last tiny unit called Probability and Statistics. It's a 3-week unit, and after that we will start review. Before we get into anything mathy though, I do want to give you just a basic introduction to data and statistics. Data is information gathered from real-life sources, and statistics is the mathematical analysis of that information. In trig, we'll concentrate on the statistics or the mathematical analysis part of the data more so than gathering it. But it's worthwhile to have a background on how data is gathered. Researchers usually cannot make direct observations of every individual in a population they're studying. Instead, they collect data from a subset of individuals and use those observations to make inferences surrounding their research question. A population is a group about which information is desired. Whereas a sample is part of a population chosen to get information about the whole population. You can use a sample of a population to estimate how many people perform a certain task. For example, if the city is trying to determine the frontrunner in a mayoral election, they may choose to survey citizens at a local grocery store. While all voters in the city is the population for the survey, the sample is just the people that are asked to complete the survey in that grocery store. Researchers hope that this sample is reflective of the entire population. Pause the video and think about the scenario below. Answer the questions that follow. Once you determine your research question and your sample, you should strategically plan the best way to gather data. There are 4 types of research designs that you're responsible for knowing about in this course. The first type is a census. A census is a study that obtains data from every member of a population. In most studies, a census is not practical because of the cost or time required to gather information from every member of the population. A good example of a census, though, is if Richie Rich wants to know the median household income in his county. This is government data. This data has already been gathered. The easiest way for Richie to go about this is to obtain that government census that contains the data he wants. More practical and more common than a census is a survey. A survey is a study that obtains data from a sample of a population in order to estimate attributes of the larger population. Researchers can obtain lots of data efficiently and conveniently using a survey. For example, if Jack and Jill want to determine the average number of hours parents spend reading to their newborns in a week, it would be impossible for them to get this data from every parent in the country or the world. A more practical thing for Jack and Jill to do is survey just a small sample of that population that they're targeting. The third type of study design is a controlled experiment. A controlled experiment is just that, a study in which a researcher attempts to understand the effect that a variable has on a specific attribute of a population. The key to a controlled experiment is that it involves a control setup and an experimental setup, so that a researcher can deliberately test the effect of a specific variable. The last design that you're responsible for is an observational study. An observational study is one in which a researcher gathers data on subjects in their natural environment. The researcher does not impact subjects or treatment. Pause the video and think about the scenarios below. Answer the questions that follow. Companies, institutions, and world leaders make major decisions based on the results of certain studies. It is important that the data that researchers gather is valid. It is impossible to design a perfect study, but we can strive for accuracy by avoiding bias. Bias often occurs when the survey sample does not accurately represent the population. Bias can be a result of a number of different things, from how participants were selected to how the experiment was administered. For example, if you survey every fifth customer walking into Wegmans about their favorite grocery store, it's likely that your results will not accurately represent the population that you are targeting. There's a serious flaw in participant selection here, which is likely to introduce bias. Of course, Wegmans shoppers are partial to Wegmans, otherwise they wouldn't be there. A study that measures the number of students in Hilton High School that smoke cigarettes is likely to produce bias as well. The design of the survey, although it may be anonymous, is not likely to elicit honest responses. This is a serious flaw in the design of the study. Researchers tried to improve the reliability of the results by doing their best to minimize bias when designing research studies. Pause the video and think about the scenario below. Answer the question that follows.